Hello everyone, happy Thursday, happy the Inside Scope. Hello Norton, I'm so glad that you've joined me today. We're asking some big questions here in the Inside Scope, but first let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Triffany Hammond, just like Tiffany with an R. You can learn all about me at triffanyhammond.com. I am a certified professional life coach and I help strong women figure out how to add the peace and happiness piece to all of the great things that they're doing outside in the world in terms of family, friends, and profession. Thank you for the hearts. I'm so glad you're here. This is so much more fun when people come. So what we're going to talk about today is the fact that I do this scope every third Thursday of the month, 9 a.m. Mountain Time. And I get questions from you, and this is my time to answer them and help you out. Hi, I'm so glad. So what has happened, though, from some of you who have written, you've said things like, I want to ask questions and I want to be involved, and I know I've got stuff that I'm working on, but I don't know how to dial down to the question that I'm asking. I'm not quite sure where it is I need help. So how do I ask a question if I don't know how to get down that far and get to the question part? So I thought we would do a whole scope today exactly on that piece. And it's really a fascinating question, isn't it? Because you'd think living inside your own head, you would know exactly where you were. You would know, yeah, you have this problem too. See, you're not the only one. The ones that you've reached out, you're not the only ones. Other people experience this too. We know we have work to do, right? And you would think that we would be so in tune with our needs and our desires and the efforts we've made so far that we know exactly where we need help. Well, guess what? This is what a life coach is for. We provide that reflection to you to help you dial that down. But having been asked this question, how do I get to the right questions, really helped me deconstruct what that even looks like. But let's start with the beginning piece of why this has even come up at this point now. So my audience, the people that hi, I'm so glad you joined. Welcome, welcome. My audience, the people I help, the people that seem to respond to the messages, especially that I put out here via Periscope and Twitter and my social media, they've already figured out that the Dear Abby type question isn't where they need help. So they know that they're no longer trying to make the world come to them. They're no longer trying to force change outside themselves. They understand, I understand, you understand if you're here, that we can't make anybody do anything, right? So all of that complaining about, why won't people listen to me? Why can't I get people to see things the way that I see? Why can't I get so-and-so to show up for me and put into the relationship what I put into, right? We've already understood that we can't make that happen. So the next level toward the self-actualization piece, toward this inner peace part of our human development is going, okay, well, if I can't manufacture change outside of myself, if I can't make that happen outside of myself, what do I need to do inside of myself to get right with what is? Right? Yes. That's the big question. Yes, that's absolutely right. That's the big question. How do I get right inside of myself? And that's where we begin to see progress in everything we do in leaps and bounds. It's a tricky journey, and for some, it's a very painful journey. I know my journey has come very difficult for me. It's been a hard, and I'm somebody who's been pretty self-aware my entire life, and still it's come with some pretty hard knocks of like, oh gosh, I'm back there. Ooh, I have that to forgive again. Oh my gosh, let's start all over again. And that's something that is an ongoing process, which again is another thing we want to be okay with. See, yeah. Yes, you're absolutely right. So the comment is, I constantly feel like I've overcome something only to have to do it again. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And we tend to think of life as being linear, that if we just go through, A through Z steps, we'll end up at the pot of gold and our reward is there at the end. And as we grow and as we mature, we find out that that's not really the case. That doesn't really happen. What happens instead is this spiral, sort of this repeating of lessons. That yes, we're moving along the spiral and we're moving ahead, but every time we come back to that top of the spiral, the view is the same. It's the same issue that we're dealing with. It's the same heartache. It's the same lesson. And the story we tell ourselves about coming back to that same view is what is the difference between pain or suffering. So yes, we can come back to that same pain or the same pleasure. I mean, the pleasure exists on this spiral too, right? We can come back to that same place. But what we tell ourselves about being back in that place is where our journey begins. So if we're telling ourselves, oh, here I am again, I wonder what I have left to learn, right? If you read my article on forgiving my father, the murderer, you know that that was a question that I asked myself. Okay, so I'm back in this place. All right. So where do I have work left to do? It's okay. There's no judgment there. It's just knowing that there's some more steps to take. That's it. That's the only story that needs to exist right there, right? But if we get back to that same view and instead we start telling ourselves, oh, here I am again. God, will I ever learn? I am a complete failure. You think I'd have this figured out by now, right? Now we've taken that pain point and we've added suffering. Does that make sense? Good. I'm glad this is resonating with you, because what we want to do is get to a point where we change the inner workings of ourselves so that we can eliminate the suffering. And now we can use that pain to our advantage, because what happens in our personal growth when we get to the point where we go, I wonder where I have work to do. What happens when we get there is that we take that next step with courage. We take that next step with fortitude. We take that next step with love and grace and kindness toward ourselves and toward everyone else, because we're not already burdened and laden with the yoke of the suffering story, the yoke of the hardship that we have self-imposed. Does that make sense? If that's not making sense, throw your questions out. I'd love to answer your questions if that's not adding up. So we're starting with the presumption, right? When we start asking about what questions to ask when we're on the path to inner peace, when we start there, we're already foregoing those questions that rely on somebody else to change. We're not trying to make anybody else show up differently, okay? Incidentally, though, I'm going to tell you from personal experience, myself and my clients both, the more we change, the more people around us change, because the agreements change, right? The way we show up is different, so they show up differently. We break the patterns of old arguments. So that external change does happen, but that external change isn't the goal. The internal change, the internal growth, that inner peace is the goal. So I was posed with the interesting question of, okay, so how do you dial down to the questions? How do you know what questions to ask? This is something I'm actually getting pretty good at, is this sort of deconstructing what I sort of take for granted in myself. I told you I've been a pretty self-aware human for a long time, started meditating when I was 13. I've been journaling on and off for most of my life, mostly on for the last 20 years. And I have gotten really good at starting with that bigger piece and dialing down and dialing down and dialing down until I can get to a point where I can communicate what that process looks like. So that's what I've done today. In fact, you know what? Oh, it occurs to me, I should have put this on a link on my website. See what I've done here? I've got some questions. Here's how I have dialed it all down. On the recording, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're probably already seeing a link pop up here, but since I didn't do this ahead of time, I will put this on my website. Since I don't have a link to tell you, just know I will put this on my website for you. You can go download this if this is helpful for you. You're welcome. Yeah, absolutely. This is what it's all about, right? Sharing ideas and helping each other out. Oh my gosh, being of service to the world. Holy cow. Why else are we here if we're not here for each other? No, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Yes. Happy to do it. So the biggest thing to understand when we start looking at this path, you're welcome. When you start looking at this path toward inner peace, is there's a difference between your feeling, your thoughts, the way you articulate those thoughts, and then what you do about that articulation, what you do after you have put shape to it with words, right? Now, what's going on at the feeling space, there's no question to come to me with. but there are questions to ask yourself, right? Because the moment you start asking yourself, what am I feeling? And there's two questions here. What am I feeling and where does it show up in my body? So the moment you start asking yourself, what is this? What am I feeling? Is the moment you start putting words to it. It's the moment you start to give it shape, right? Because we can feel all day long, but if we're not putting a thought to that feeling, we haven't identified it and we haven't done anything with it. And the reason we look for it in our body is because sometimes we can feel the emotion before we can recognize it up here. Our thoughts, especially as women, oh my gosh, are on just this steady stream, right? You're okay, so you're like me, yay, we're all crazy together. But our thoughts are on such a steady stream here that it's hard to catch the ones that are getting in our way. It's hard to catch the ones that are stopping our process to inner peace. So just taking a moment and go, what am I feeling? And where do I feel it in the body? Helps us identify that when we have that sensation in the body again, we go, oh, that's where I feel anger, or that's how I feel guilt, or that's how I feel excitement and pleasure. So something's going on. Something's alerting me, right, to pay attention and act on something differently. So we always want to identify that piece in the body. And if you are in the Conscious Transitions course, yes, I was just going to say that. If you're in the Conscious Transitions course, the home course in grief and growth, there we go into every emotion, thought around grieving and succeeding, right? Just surviving and thriving. We go through all of those emotions and get you really in touch with this. Boy, that is something that will accelerate your growth because you can quickly identify what's going on and very quickly address it with the tools that you've learned to help you heal. So make sure you're checking out Conscious Transitions for sure. So at any rate, what you want to do is, what am I feeling? Where am I feeling it in the body? And you'll start to categorize. Guilt feels like this. Pain feels like this. Excitement feels like this. Thrill feels like this. And you'll begin to grab that sooner and sooner the more you practice this more quickly. Okay? Then the moment, like I said, the moment you ask yourself this question, what am I feeling? You begin to put thoughts to those words. So now you're going to identify the thoughts. What thoughts arose as I began to feel what I felt? And where did those thoughts show up in my body? Okay, so the example I wrote down here is, so there's no question to come to me on the feeling part, but once you get to the thoughts, now you start identifying some questions you can ask me. The question to yourself is, what thoughts arose as I began to feel, and where did that show up in my body? That's what you're asking yourself. But what comes of that are the questions you ask me. Right? So as you're going in there and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling one way, but I shouldn't feel that way. So I wrote down, why do I feel one way when I shouldn't? Right? That would be a question you come to the Inside Scope or to me as a life coach or to a confidant or whoever it is you're doing your personal growth with, right? Why do I feel this way when I know I shouldn't? Why do I feel burdened when I should be grateful? Why do I feel guilty when I should feel proud? Those are introspective questions that help you begin that process of dialing down to what's really in your way, to what's really going on, to not just the pain as you've come around that spiral, but identifying the suffering. It's a big one. Guilt's a huge one. I think everybody feels it, especially as women. We constantly feel good. We know we're good. We know we're accomplished. We know our hearts are in the right place. And we constantly feel like we just can't do enough. That's it. That's it. I feel like we're just never enough. Yep. You called it. So you're not alone. Come to Conscious Transitions. Keep coming to these. Yeah, we'll get it all sorted out. So then, remember, feelings, thoughts, words. So now you have, in identifying the feeling, you've begun to form thoughts. And because you've started to form the thoughts, you've begun to put words to it. So how would I describe this to somebody else? These are questions to yourself. This is to help you get down to that next layer. How would I describe this thought, this feeling to somebody else? What thoughts arise as I imagine myself telling people or asking for help? And how does that show up in my body? Do you see how all of these might be slightly different? They might all trigger different feelings, and how each feeling deserves this same process, right? So you might have started out feeling kind of numb, right? And when you went in, you said, okay, where does this feel in my body? What am I really thinking about? Then you go through your to-do list and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm numb because I'm overwhelmed. There's so much to do. But really, I shouldn't feel burdened. I shouldn't feel like, I mean, these are all good things. Why can't I appreciate what I have, right? Now there's guilt. That shows up differently in the body. So now you can see how even this is a spiral, right? You could even go back to, okay, so if I feel overwhelmed, what does that feel like? What are my thoughts around that? What are my words around that? What are my deeds around that? How about the guilt that showed up? You can see how there's just layers and layers. And I don't want you to feel like you have to do this all at once. All you're doing today is becoming aware of this process. Never looked at it this way. I know, well, you know, these are things that we do kind of on autopilot, and we don't understand how to deconstruct them until somebody puts it in front of us, right? So yeah, it's of course you wouldn't. You just go about living your life, getting your shit done, right? I mean, that's just what we do. So you can see how this isn't something that you want to tackle all at once or feel like every time you feel something you have to go through this. These are for those times when you're like, I'm kind of hitting the same wall and I'm not sure how to overcome that, but I feel like it's time because this pattern has got me worn out. This pattern, I'm a little sick of the pattern, right? So that's when you take the time to do this. So now you're putting words to this that are bringing up other feelings. So the questions you might bring to me would be, so when I say I feel I'm burdened out loud, now I feel like a spoiled brat. When I say I feel guilty, I see my mother in me. Oh my God, now I feel bad that I have bad thoughts about my mother, right? I picked this one because it's common. I see the hearts. You're not alone. You're not alone. I picked this because this goes on for so many women, men too, but this just goes on for us. So have faith. It gets better. So those might be the questions you bring me, right? Oh my God, I'm starting to see my mom in me. Why am I even acting like that's a bad thing when she's done so much? And where is this guilt coming from? And where is this burden coming from, right? So, oh my gosh, I'm losing my voice. Hold on. Give me just a second. The animals are chasing each other around the house. Live streaming, you gotta love it. Oh, still can't talk well. Luna, leave Mystic alone. Leave it. Oh, he's a good girl. Okay. Now that we have peace again and my voice is back, how about that? So now you begin to understand how we're we're getting through these layers, and you're starting to identify the places where you can seek help. Okay, these are the types of questions you can bring here. You can bring to me in our personal sessions, to our coaching sessions if you're part of the course, whatever that looks like. But you're beginning to see where you can get to, not the symptom, right? We can start there if you want, and I can help you dial down. But really, we're not dealing with those symptoms. We can put Band-Aids on all day, but that's not going to heal the infection underneath. So what we're really trying to do is get to that piece underneath that's keeping you stuck overall. Because whatever that pattern is, I guarantee you, no matter what view you're taking on that spiral, right? No matter the piece that you are on that spiral, once you break that pattern, you see accelerated growth because you don't have those stories in place that hold you there. Like that's your gospel truth. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, good. So feeling, thought, word, deed. We just went over word. Where does deed come in? Deed is, now what are my options? So I realize I've got some healing to do around my mom, right? Do I have a conversation with her? If I decide not to, why am I not? I've identified where my problem is. Do I have a different problem to solve first? Something about confidence, something about faith in her, something about faith in me. What is that, right? So you're coming back to the questions that get you not just thinking, not just rolling around in your head, but now it's what do I do with this? Because all of this is great in theory, but as long as you're inward, as long as all you're doing is internalizing these thoughts, then nothing changes outward. At some point, you've got to do something. Yes, it's worthless without action. You're absolutely right. All of this work is worthless without action, and that's what you want to get to. Okay? So that's the deconstruction. that's how you get to those questions. And you can ask me questions, or whoever you're working with. It doesn't have to be me, but wherever you're working, if you're trying to get past the frustrations of your outer world, if you're trying to get past being so frustrated with the world today and people today, and why people should know me, why aren't they treating me the way I expect them to treat me? If you're ready to get past that level of suffering and pain and ready to come inward, this is where you start. Here's the piece that you come to. Make sense? Good. Yay! Yay! We're getting somewhere. So excited. So I've got one more thing, and this is one of the fastest ways I get to my personal work, and I'll share that with you in just a second. But I want to remind you to put these on your calendar. Third Thursday of every month, 9 a.m. Mountain Time. That's 8 a.m. West Coast and 11 a.m. East Coast. Put these on your calendar. Make sure you're showing up for these. And did you know that I do a weekly scope as well? Wednesdays at 8:30 a.m. Mountain Time, I do a scope called Scoping Out, where I basically offer my process. Here's the stuff I'm working on. Here's how I'm working through it. Here are the tools I'm using. It's a great way for you to be able to dive into some of the problems we all share and learn some tools along the way. One of the ways that I have found out completely by accident that people who follow me and what I do learn is through the articles I write about my own personal experiences. So I started to just share that publicly, and it seems to be helpful. So come to those as well. Also, if you are contemplating going through, or have been through a divorce, or you know anyone else in those stages, tell them about conscious transitions. These tools are the kinds of tools people go, okay, now I'm ready to heal. But what's happening is they're tools that people are wishing they had before they started the process, because it would have allowed them to have the grace with themselves, with their kids, with their ex, with their family and their friends through the process. That would have made the healing process a lot simpler. So don't wait to be a part of that course. Make sure that if you're going through anything like that, that you're coming. And if you know of anybody who's going through anything like that, that you send them to the course. There's no reason it has to be that hard. So you can go to triffanyhammond.com/healthy divorce. It is possible. Come along for the ride. Let me help. It's what I do. All right, so the last little piece that I want to share with you, and this is the fastest way I get to my issues. You've heard me say it before. It's my you spot it, you got it principle. Any time I make a judgment of someone else, something else, of myself, positive or negative, I understand that I would not be able to see that if it didn't exist in me. So the moment I'm saying, oh, why don't people just be nice to each other? Okay, you wouldn't be able to see that, Triffany, if there wasn't work left for you to do about being nice. How about making the judgment in the first place? Start there, right? How about looking at some of the recurring themes that have been coming up? Okay, so you've had 3 conversations perhaps that have come up that have been with people that have had the similar complaint. So they're seeing something that you're seeing, and you all have work on it, and it keeps coming up. Like you're being reminded, right? That is the fastest way I get to my work. And on the positive side, if I'm looking around, I'm like, oh my God, people are so smart. They're so innovative. How do people get so good at what they do, right? If I'm asking those questions, that exists in me as well. Where can I then begin to look at what it is I do well? I happened to mention earlier on, one of the things I'm good at is identifying the things I take for granted and deconstructing them, right? So, you spot it, you got it, is a really fast way to get to those questions. It's a really fast way to find the work that's left inside of you that needs healing, needs growth, needs evolution, so that you can find your path to your peace, to your happiness. And then you start bringing your best work to the world, especially in service to the world. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? Thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions, make sure that you're sending them to the comments on my blog. The comments, if you're seeing this on YouTube instead of my blog, put them in the doobly-doo at the bottom. I love the interaction. I know most of the time some of this is confidential, so I know most of the time your feedback comes to me through email. That's completely fine too. You can send it to my offices at info@triffanyhammond.com, and I'm super happy to be a part of your process in any way that I can. And remember, we're just all in this together. So hang in there. You're not alone. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad that we get to do this together. It's such a fun journey. And give yourselves a great big hug from me. Go out, create a great week. Remember to subscribe, and I will see you next time here on The Inside Scoop. Bye, everybody. All right. Why is this ending piece so struggle? I see it. It's working. Here we go. Okay, bye.